Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are, and happy Monday. My name is Dionne Mack. I am Chief Diversity Officer at iPEC. And first, I want to thank everyone for sharing their time and their space and their energy to join into this dialogue today. With me, I have some esteemed members of the iPEC community to join in on a conversation centered around social justice, consciousness, and coaching. So before we get started, I do want to open up the floor and introduce or have our group introduce themselves so you have an idea of who is involved in the dialogue. I'm going to start with my top left-hand corner and kind of work around the room. So we've switched up a little bit, and now Patrice, you are in the top hand left corner.
Lucky me.
Lucky you.
Well, thank you, Dionne. I am privileged to be with all of you today. I'm Patrice Hall, and I describe myself as a bit of a corporate refugee in that I spent over 20 years in corporate America until I escaped to do more rewarding things. About half of that time was spent as an MBA running businesses, and then the second half was spent leading diversity initiatives and then consulting to other diversity practitioners. In 2012, the universe presented me with an opportunity to do anything I wanted in my final professional act. And I realized that regardless of the role that I had been in, what I had enjoyed most was actually coaching individuals to reach their greatest potential. So I launched my own coaching business in 2012, Patrice Hall and Associates, LLC. I, after a couple of years, decided to train at iPEC. It was one of the most rewarding experiences I've had. And since then, I have been coaching mid-career corporate professionals in their leadership capabilities. What I like to say is I'm like a personal trainer. I meet my clients wherever they are on their leadership journeys and then coach them to where they want to be. It is the most fulfilling and rewarding role I've ever had.
Patrice, thank you. And the next box over would be Rebekah Rebekah Markillie. Do you want to introduce yourself? And did I pronounce that properly?
Yeah, it's Rebekah Markillie. Hello, everyone. I use she, her pronouns. I do so much stuff related to justice work. And all of that work really informs my the work that I do as a coach. I'm a communist, I'm a tenant organizer, I'm a movement builder, and I'm also a liberatory coach. And as a coach, I really help leaders, organizers, organizations, anybody who really cares about collective change and liberation. I help them unlearn and alchemize, transform systemic oppression. So imperialism, patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy, colonialism, all those things that really can hold us down and keep us small, and help them step into a world of liberation, into inspired action, so that, we can disrupt the order of things and make the impossible possible. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon, and yeah, I'm a tenant organizer and a communist, and I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you, Rebekah. And next we have Tanya Eckos.
Hello, everyone. As Dionne said, I'm Tanya Echols. I am an iPEC lead trainer and mentor coach. I am also the founder and managing principal of Vigier. I do executive coaching and leadership consulting. And as similar to Patrice, I spent most of the last 25 years in the corporate environment, and now really have so much passion around helping people understand what leadership means for them. And I am especially committed to making sure that we no longer treat diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice as a add-on. This is not something you bolt onto your leadership. This is part of who you are, your intercultural competency, your ability to lead large inclusive teams is something that is now embedded in what it means to be a leader. And we want to make sure that people start to understand it in that way, that it's not an extra, it's not an option, it is now part of what we do. So that's part of what I do across the board, working with individuals, with teams and organizations on how they can achieve the performance that they're looking for, but doing it through the lens of the people, and how are they taking care of the people who are in their own teams, who are their customers, who are their partners, who are collectively in the communities that they're serving. So I'm glad to be here and excited.
Glad to have you, Tanya. Thank you for that. Lawrence Henderson, you're up next.
All right. How's it going, everyone? Thank y'all so much for being here. I am Lawrence Henderson. I am the Chief Learning Officer for Business Operational Support Services, LLC. Yes, that was very long, AKA boss. You see it in the back. And what I do is I'm an organizational leadership and development coach, trainer, and consultant. And what all that really means is I work on the dispositions of people. I've been in former Army officer and now transitioned to the corporate space, helping leaders, again, connect to where they are to where they desire to be and be the best leader for not only themselves, but the communities in which they serve. So I'm excited to dig into this and get rolling.
Thank you, Lawrence. Alyssa Hall, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Hall. I am an anti-racism and leadership coach. So I really work with coaches and I help them step into their leadership position and authentically implement anti-racism and DEI strategies into their businesses, as well as how they work with clients. So I'm just so excited to have this conversation, and I'm grateful that so many of y'all are here to speak with us.
It is a large group, but I thought that it was good to have varied perspectives at the table. Okay. Thank you, Alyssa. And next up, we have Sarah Grausz.
Hi, everyone. This is hard to be in the last slot, and I'm just so impressed with everyone who's on this panel and nervous. I just feel my heart just like going right now. So I'm happy to be here. Really honored to be asked to be in this panel. I'm an organizational coach and the founder of a nonprofit called Tessera Project. I've been working with international mission-driven clients since 2018. And I provide educational awareness and coaching on how to build more equitable and inclusive workplaces. I provide training and coaching both at the team and individual level. And we do that to focus on white savior complex, on psychological safety, really at the heart of how we approach systems change. I'm also presently researching and expanding my practice to include cognitive behavioral coaching and how we can use that to support employee mental health. And thanks again, Dionne, for having us all here today.
And you were nervous. Why, with all that awesome work that you're doing? I'm the one that should be nervous in this esteemed group. So I want to thank all of you for your time and again for contributing to this conversation. Today actually kicks off International Coaching Week for 2021, and the theme is Defying Challenging Times. And I thought that this was a perfect conversation to have this week because we are certainly in the middle of what could be considered challenging times, whether it's a global pandemic and everyone racing to engage in a debate about vaccinations, right? I'm not going to say everyone is racing to get vaccinated, but it's personal choice. But for sure, we have all of that going on. We have the unrest and conflicts that are happening, Ethiopia, Israel, all over the world. You have protests in Colombia, tropical cyclones in India, coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the George Floyd murder. And so I said, what a great theme, defying challenging times. And what kind of sparked me wanting to have this conversation today is Rebekah actually posted a question in the iPEC Facebook group, and it got a lot of engagement. And I don't want to get it wrong, but basically your question was around what is our ethical duty as coaches to confront the impact of social ills like inequality and colonialism, like you mentioned in your introduction, and all of the things that may be systemic barriers to raise consciousness, if you will, in the world. And there was quite engagement in that conversation and folks coming from just various perspectives. And I said, this will be a great time to open up and have this dialogue in a much more open space, bring others into the conversation and just kind of talk about it, right? And so here we are today. And I want to just be mindful of this can be, as it was in the Facebook group, a very charged conversation. People come at it with different thoughts and different ideas, and we are open to all of that, but I want us to be mindful of our energy as we engage in the conversation, and also recognize that we all may have different triggers that come up in the dialogue. So just to be mindful of that, but recognize that we agree to always afford grace and space to each other as we engage in the dialogue. So with that, I'm actually going to put it off to you, Rebekah, first, as the one who posed the question. What is our ethical duty as it relates to, as coaches, right? As it relates to confronting social inequality and social ills. And I will say, as we get started, that for sure, as coaches, and as since we're all from the iPEC community that is engaged in this dialogue, I believe we all have unique skills that position us to be able to whether to navigate through these challenging times and or lend themselves well to work as it relates to confronting challenges in the world. But does that make us ethically responsible to do so?
All right, I guess I'll just jump in right there. I would say that we definitely do have an ethical responsibility as human beings and as coaches to both reduce the harm that exists in the world and to, I guess, make the world better than where it is right now and where we are at this present moment. And I think as coaches, like Dionne said, I think we have a particular set of skills that really make this work a lot more accessible to people and a lot easier and a lot sustainable. Like I came to coaching and really was able to come into my identity as a coach through the application within the movement space, within justice work. And if we are really committed to this idea of consciousness raising and being able to access those higher levels of energy, level 6 and level 7, I think it's absolutely imperative that we really look at systemic injustice as a factor in our energy levels. And if we're really able to take that level 6 perspective of we are all one, that really goes the other way too. And like, we are not free unless everyone else is free. And so, yeah, that's really where I see this conversation, and I see our role as coaches to be in justice work and to look at our work as justice work.
You guys, just to make sure you all recognize, you are on mute. So unmute yourselves. And Lawrence, I see you have something you want to say, so jump right in.
Yeah, so fundamentally, I agree with Rebekah, but when you think about yourself as a coach, the idea is, am I being curious or am I seeking to be confrontational in giving instruction on how someone else should be living their life? And so that's where I believe the semantics of, are we talking about ethics? Are we talking about morality? I think, yes, as a coach, you should posture yourself and position yourself to potentially challenge mindsets, but to assign direction is another thing all in of itself. And so when you talk about the way that we all have grown up, I'm from the Midwest. I grew up fully Pentecostal and all that means in the world. And so to assign me another type of religious affiliation or background, it just seemed like something that was unattainable. But now as a coach, one thing, the self-work that I've done is to make myself curious about what is it about someone else that makes them unique? What is it about someone else that makes them tick? And I believe, particularly in this work, if you start with the foundation of, I'm going to be curious about your stance, then I'm going to connect that to how you show up in accordance with your values and what filters you're using to now move throughout the world and impact those around you. And so to me, I believe the word or use of ethical is some a charge in of itself, because that's to mean, or someone could insinuate that I'm not living in right standing as a person. And that, I believe, is where a lot of the gaslighting and a lot of these things can come from, is what's the context behind the position of coach. I believe the position of coach is to challenge, not to assign. someone's position.
And I'll just add to that, Lawrence. I think as coaches, we are ethically bound to hold space and create space for people to explore what is happening for them and how they are experiencing the situation. I have my personal ethics, and I mean, Lord, I was born in Florida, raised in Tennessee, and I lived in Georgia for the last 25 years. So I know what this looks like from a lot of different angles. And understanding that I have my personal beliefs and how I choose to show up and how I choose to treat other humans, but I have personal beliefs about a lot of different things as well. And it is not my place as a coach to come in and tell someone you are right or you are wrong. It is my place, as Lauren said, to challenge people to think about other perspectives, to explore how this may be impacting others. We all talk about, kind of taking that meta view of the world. But it is not, I feel, my place to come in and tell someone you are not living in alignment about anything as a coach. Now you come and talk to Tanya as a consultant, as someone who has and does diversity, equity, inclusion consulting and training and facilitation and all of that. That's a different discussion. But as a coach, it is my place to have those tough discussions, hold people accountable, and have them look at what is the impact of their behavior and how they choose to change it.
Thank you, Tanya, for that. And so I'm going to challenge a little bit, just because I like to challenge a little bit, right? And it's not that I don't agree with everything that's been said. I actually do. But at the same time, there's this, and maybe this is me challenging because it's my own personal dialogue almost every day, right? So if we want to see change in the world, even thinking back to who said it? Was it Rebekah? I think you said it in the beginning. We are one, right? All humans, all living things. At the end of the day, we're all interconnected and we're all one. So if I believe that is the case, and I see that there are things that are happening that are impacting my brothers and sisters on this earth, then how can I say that we are one and I'm not doing something or saying something or feel some level of, oh my gosh, I need to speak up? You see something, say something, as it relates to my brothers and sisters who may be experiencing inequality or whatever it is, injustice or whatever it is that they're experiencing as a human, right? How can I not do something? How can I think it's okay for me to be like, yeah, well, I'm more focused on yoga right now. So
yeah, no, and again, and that's exactly the question. Yes, if you choose to speak up, you speak up. I choose to speak up, I speak up. But when I sit in a room and I'm coaching someone, I will help people explore their experiences, explore how they're showing up. But again, if we are all one, that includes who gets to choose which ones are the ones. And that's part of the problem, that we keep having this back and forth of who's the person who gets to choose. Here are the ones we're here to protect. And as opposed to, as a coach, me coming in and saying, let me work with this person in front of me to understand where they are and how they're experiencing it so they can choose to make changes and help them see other perspectives, as opposed to me coming in and shaking a finger and trying to intimidate and fear them into, you need to be a better human being.
I think just kind of to add some more nuance to what Tanya is saying here, absolutely, right? We are not going to try to prescribe or fear or coerce anybody into the justice movement. But I think that a coach's work is really about justice work. Fundamentally, your clients' transformations, that is justice work. That is the transformative nature of justice work in action. And it can be about the smallest things. It can be about something that is totally seemingly innocuous to justice and to liberation, right? It can be about the relationship with their family, their relationship with their work, but we have that holistic perspective. Everything is in relation to each other. We don't exist in a vacuum. We exist in a collective. We exist in that big sense. And so you are able to have that perspective in the coaching relationship, because the coaching relationship is justice work.
So if I can jump in here for a second. When I was thinking about this, and I confess this to the panelists, so I'll now go entirely public. I initially had some trouble with the concept. I expressed this to Dionne, whom I've known and appreciated for quite a long time, and said that yes, I would participate in this panel because she asked me, and I promised to do everything I could to support her. But that frankly, honestly, I didn't have a whole lot of energy around it because the answer seemed clear to me, much as Rebekah is describing it. And then I coached myself out of my level 1 and 2 and really tried to think about what might be going on to make this a difficult question. And I do think it is a difficult question. And what occurred to me is that I think we operate on 3 levels. There's the choices that we make as individuals in terms of who we are fundamentally, where we come from, how we're bred, what our temperament is. The second level is choices we make as individuals who've been called upon to be coaches. And I use that term intentionally because I think it is a calling when it's done right, and especially for iPEC coaches. We signed up for this as consciousness raisers. So absolutely, there's a level on which, and I think in some regards, this level is the most straightforward, that yes, as coaches, and particularly as iPEC coaches, we do have an ethical responsibility because, as we've been talking about, social justice is really fundamentally about consciousness raising. The third level is the choices that we make as coaches when we partner with our clients. And I think level 1, our choices as individuals, what's hard about that is I don't believe everybody is born to be an activist. Some people will approach things differently, and this is what we're saying. The most important thing, I think, is that as individuals, we lead a life of purpose and we figure out the thing, perhaps it's only one thing, but the thing that we can do to make this world a better place. And that's the choice that we make as individuals. And the choices that we make as coaches when we partner with our clients, I think are the most difficult ones. And that's what I think the dialogue that we're really having here. Sometimes I think about coaching as a dance. The client picks the music, but we coaches have to choreograph it. And it's it's a delicate and challenging place to be. And frankly, that's why I do it, because I love it. It's different all the time. It challenges me. But in that dance, what we are required to do many times is identify blind spots for ourselves first, and then our clients, and then coach them through powerful questions to see those blind spots. And I think if we think about social justice in that regard, it seems to feel a lot more manageable. We're not trying to make people do something that they don't want to do, but we are doing what we always do, which is helping them to see things more broadly and with more purpose.
I think
I'm sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
I think I might have interrupted Alyssa. Alyssa, were you about to say something?
Yeah, because Alyssa had her hands up, actually. Thank you. Yes, Alyssa, you're next.
No, thank you. But piggybacking off of what Patrice said, like our duties as coaches, right? And when it comes to answering this question, what is our ethical duty? For me, it's, when I think about it, it's not necessarily what we're trying to have the client do and how our input is brought into the conversation. For me, I think about it as, are we doing the most that we can in being able to serve all of our different, because of the different walks of life that they have, by the time they get to us, they're going to have a bunch of different experiences. And if we don't understand what we need to do in order to help them, that's where I feel like the biggest problem is. And I feel like when we're able to help them in a way that's transformative and makes an impact, that's where we're doing justice work without even doing justice work. But it comes from our own responsibility in learning about what's going on and how it's going to be affecting people versus just, I hate this phrase, but it's the only way to use it, just like the I don't see color. What you're saying is, I don't see how you're going to have a different experience of this event than someone else. Therefore, I'm going to use the exact same tools that I use on this person on you as well. So I remember when Rebekah posted the question in the group, there was a lot of backlash about, I don't want to put my own thoughts or feelings or experiences onto the client. And really, it's about how are we interacting in our clients at all? And how are we taking the problems that we're seeing into the world and undoing them when we're working with our clients versus just continuing to go through the motions because we're assuming that everyone else is having the same experience.
Alyssa, thank you for that. And you mentioned blind spots, and I'm going to come back to you on that. But Sarah, I know you wanted to chime in also.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating what everyone's offering here, and it all resonates. And I truly believe change starts from the inside, and it feels a little premature to rush to like, well, how can I support my clients if I haven't looked inside myself and decided what is my relationship to interlocking systems of power that serve to oppress and restrain the potential of minoritized individuals in our society and in other societies. So until I understand what my clients are going through and what kind of bias and discrimination they're facing, I'm not going to be able to hold empathy for them in the way that they need to find empathy for themselves. So I need to do that work for me to be able to help them do that work for them and trust them to be wholly capable and resourceful people, which is what we do as coaches. We're here to be with people during their most difficult moments when they're making these changes. And so I have to be able to trust myself to do that with them. So it's really, to me, the ethical responsibility comes to, am I able to be an effective coach to anyone who comes into my practice?
And so, Sarah, you touched on something that Alyssa did as well, getting to understanding our own personal blind spots so that we can have effective relationships with our clients. And so does that mean that the ethical responsibility, if we want to go back to the original question and use those terms, the ethical responsibility first and foremost is to understand our own blind spots and educate ourselves? And if that is the case, does that mean that I need to know everything that's happening in the world? And I need to have this, in-depth knowledge of, inequality in the world, or what's the plight of, you name the faction, right? So if that's the case, where do I begin?
I'm gonna start this, and then I'm gonna hand it off to anyone who wants to take it.
That was a big question, right?
Yeah, I hear level 2 in there, right? It's like an either or. Either I'm gonna do it all, or I'm gonna do nothing. And when we're in level 2, we know what to do, right? We ask, like, what is within my control? How does it relate to my values? How does it show up in my why? Like, why am I doing this work? Bring it back to the fundamentals. We don't have to do it all, but if we're running away because we think we can't, then we do have work to do.
Yeah, if I could jump in right here, it's really, to me, where you start is where you start. And whatever things are coming up for you, and I love how Rebekah framed this question, particularly around ethics. And then Alyssa, you came off top rope and elbowed it in the face, because as coaches, what you do have a responsibility for is to put out an authentic product to the world. And so for me, one of the greatest compliments that I ever got from a client who chose me after I chose them was that they were LinkedIn stalking me and Facebook, and all my messages were consistent. And as a coach, what brand or how are people experiencing you before they get in your presence and experience you? And I believe that responsibility for us as coaches is the message that we're sending, verbal and nonverbal. Does it resonate with those that we serve? And does the way that I live actually help someone be in my presence and know we can have this conversation? And it brings me to last summer, where there were several people who reached out to me because of the things that happened with the George Floyd murder. They reached out to me and said, hey, I'm in this space and I feel this hurt, but I don't know where it's coming from. And because of the things I was posting, they felt safe before they ever even met me. But when they came in my presence, they unleashed some of the most visceral things in the world, but they were ready for change. And had I reacted, I got into and I tapped in, I did that personal work. And you called it, Sarah, you called me out that level too. I was like, boy, if you was in front of me, I would throat punch you. But it was, okay, face was here. Tell me more, build context. And then we got to the disposition stuff. We got to, hey, this person means well, but they're processing it. The way their world was up until this point didn't allow them space to think about it any other way. And so now in the presence of someone else, I now was able to present a different package and now equip them with another tool. Now they got something more than just hammers and nails. They were equipped to now go have conversations more in a meaningful way, but they saw the representation and then they reached out. And so I believe that's a part of this brand and how we show up, not only as coaches, but as practitioners.
If I could just add as well, and this kind of gets back to the point I touched on earlier around that, and starting with ourselves and our own blind spots, because I want to take this to a global perspective, right? And understanding that what I feel in my society is justice may not apply everywhere else. And there is a bit of privilege in assuming that the way that I am perceiving the world is the only way to perceive it. So if I go to another part of the world and they are making decisions on justice based on a very collective way of looking at it, that may cause them to make decisions that I wouldn't, because I'm coming from a different society. So understanding that, to your point earlier about the blind spots, we want to be aware of that ourselves. And I think to Sarah's point, am I showing up for anyone who shows up in front of me, regardless of whether their background, their religion, their lifestyle is in alignment with mine? Am I still able to hold space for them? To me, that feels like justice, and that I can create that space for anyone to explore if they choose to show up in a different way. But recognizing we tend to talk about society, well, whose society are we talking about? And is it assumed that Western culture is a society we should be all moving towards, because we all got issues, right? So I think that's the thing I want to make sure we're looking at this from a global perspective. And that's why, to Sarah's point, doing the work on ourselves, and the work on ourselves may be to recognize I am always coming from some place of privilege. I don't care who I am, because I'm coming from my own spectrum of what I've seen in my own perspective.
Tanya, thank you for that. And that's absolutely right. Alyssa, I see you have your hand up.
Just quickly jumping off of what both Lawrence and Tanya said, actually, like I love what Lawrence said about the tools and the toolbox. And I also love what Tanya said about just looking at things from a global perspective. Once you start learning about certain problematic themes, that's just adding tools to your toolbox. You don't need to learn about everything and everyone. There are certain themes where we have racism here. There's what racism looks like in Australia. And then there's racism that looks different in England, but it all comes from like certain core things, certain core themes. And so when it comes to how do I learn about all this, do I need to learn about everything? When you're doing your own individual work and you're learning about other things, you're going to see the toolbox. Then when your client comes to you about something, you're going to have, just like we have all of our, like, we got those books, we have like 3 books of iPEC tools, right? And we're like, oh, okay, I hear flag, something, let me bring that tool out. Let me see if this relates. It's the exact same thing.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge is a tool. I like that. So we have a question in the Q&A box, and I'm going to bring it to the panel because first of all, the question is to the panelists. And I'm going to, honestly, I'm happy that this person asked this because it also lends itself to the work that I'm doing. So what Mel Beiser or Mel Baser, and I apologize, Mel, if I pronounce this incorrectly. But the question is, I'm curious if the panelists feel that the iPEC coach training should incorporate more of an analysis of systems of power and intersectionality of oppression. And I guess that almost gets to, how much knowledge we have in order to build our toolbox. And as, of course, part of the job, I'm looking at our curriculum. This is a great question to ask, and I would love the panelists' thoughts on that. So I'm going to pose it again. Curious if you feel that the iPEC coach training should incorporate more of an analysis of systems of power and intersectionality of oppression in order to build the toolbox of our iPEC coaches. Who wants to answer first on that one? I don't see any hands up.
I'd love to.
Sarah, yes.
That was Rebekah. Sorry.
Oh, that was you, Rebekah. I'm sorry. I was looking at Sarah and I thought I saw you saying something. Rebekah, I apologize.
No worries. Oh, I'm so excited, Mel, that you asked that question. Thanks for being here. I absolutely think that iPEC could do a better job at incorporating more, education about systemic injustice, about intersectionality into the curriculum. I think that really just benefits everyone if that happens. Like, we're better able to use the levels of energy. We're better able to see where, like, the roots of catabolic energy and our gremlins when we are able to understand systemic oppression. But because iPEC is a global company, like there are iPEC coaches all over the world, I really, really think that it needs to be based in an anti-oppression lens, not anti-oppression, anti-imperialist lens, and through decolonization as a perspective, because we have these huge global systems of imperialism and of colonialism that really do, color our lenses, our perspectives on change around the world. And so in order to do that, we have to really, really think about that big perspective and understand that our perspective as Americans, our views about race, our views about class, gender are definitely not the end all be all. And there is so much nuance to be found within the weeds of that intersectionalist perspective.
Yeah, and I would say from all of the intense weekends that you get into, I believe the approach that I would love to see from iPEC's perspective is a almost cultural competency, right? It's an upskill in knowledge around these topics. What is intersectionality? What is unconscious bias? What is microaggressions? And by the end of the weekend, we all make sure we call it aggressive. And so what does that look like from again, I go back to my tool thing, so that coaches are introduced. And so when it's introduced in a client session, potentially, because we don't know, we're setting the agreement at the beginning of the session. And so we're familiar to the extent that now we have something to go back and grab onto versus, hey, this is iPEC's position on this, that, and other. But from a knowledge standpoint, we're equipping you with the ability to have the conversation. And again, throughout the weekend, just like we do coaching reps and all the rest of that stuff, what does this conversation look like amongst this intimate group of people who, again, show up with the intention that I want to be better, not only for myself, but for my client. And I think that space will be a powerful space to have culturally competent spaces where everyone's already coming with the intention to learn. Hopefully they're coming with the intention to learn, but then share, and it be okay to say, hey, this is where I'm coming from. And then in that space, experience challenge, experience call out, experience different things. Again, understanding that I believe, I don't know, I'm just maybe talking about my cohorts, but we had that group where we could really lean on each other as it pertains to building up a capacity to have these conversations well. So I believe that would be an amazing ask.
Lawrence, thank you. And I am happy to say that we are working now to supplement or to modify the curriculum and add in initially some coursework around just those foundational things, Lawrence, that you mentioned. And from there, build out, more in-depth tools and resources around different diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, social justice topics. But at least when you get into the coach training program, you will not go through that without having an introductory course or learning opportunity around what is bias, what is unconscious bias, what is, all these terms that we're using, and understanding how, which gets to a question that was raised in the Q&A, how do you recognize, first of all, that we all have blind spots, and what are things that you can do to begin to uncover those? And so the question in the Q&A box is, how can we uncover our blind spots? The asker says that they find this challenging because you don't know what you don't know. And that's exactly right. You don't know what you don't know. So getting into some of our expertise and doing some of this work for a long time, I pose the question to each of you, what advice would you give to someone when they say, how do I uncover my blind spots?
I'll jump out there really quickly and just say, take a look around. Look at who's in your circle. Look at who you talk to every day. Who do you engage with? Who are you connecting to? What opportunities are you creating for yourself to actually ever hear anyone else's perspective? And, I'll put this out here. Look at your Facebook pictures, look at your social media pictures and see who's in those photos. And I think a lot of people don't recognize when they look at all the photos, oh my gosh, we're all out here, they're so great. And see who's in those photos. Is it just a lot of people who look a lot like you? And that's going to be one wake-up call for you to start to recognize, wait a minute. Yeah, it's hard to find a blind spot, but I don't even have anybody to even let me know I'm off the road, because I'm surrounding myself, and it's, again, similarity bias, all of those things that we tend to gravitate towards people who have things in common with us. But once I'm aware that I have that, I do have choice as to whether I choose to go make sure I am exposing myself to people different than I am. Mm-hmm. That would be one I'll put out there. I'm sure there's many others everyone can share, but that's the biggest one, because I see it in Facebook, I'll see it in Instagram, you see it everywhere where people post, oh my gosh, it's girls' night, or here's our whole cohort. And it's like, oh wow, you don't even notice that, do you? That it's all people who look just like you.
You know what, Tanya, I have to tell you, so it's amazing to me, or I'm shocked every time I do it. The exercise circle of trust. And who remembers from what was the Meet the Fockers, right? Rob De Niro in the circle of trust. But when you ask folks, just kind of outline, not your family, your closest 7 people. And going into it, everyone thinks, no, I have a very, I have a diverse network that I engage with. I have a friend that is name the group. And then when we come back and I say, well, let's look at our circles of trust. And it's like, ooh, not quite so diverse. Everyone kind of, and it's a natural thing, but we don't realize, it's almost like not seeing the forest from the trees because you're in it. So folks are surprised with as simple as an exercise as that is, how enlightening it can be.
And I did want to just add in, I say that without blame or accusation. I say that from a place of awareness. Be aware, right? So if you go look at your photos from last weekend or whatever, you're like, ooh, this is not Tanya saying, yep, see, you're the problem. No, it's just, you didn't know. And why would you know?
And listen, I had one friend do this exercise, and when you looked at it, it was like, okay, from a color perspective, right, or first glance, you say, oh, it's pretty diverse. And it's like, oh, guess what? Every single person in your group is a single mother, right? So it's like, it can be diverse in some ways, but still very, very homogeneous in others. And so, again, to your point, no blame. We all kind of do it. It's a natural thing. It's a natural part of how our brain operates. But for sure, just looking at that. So that's one way. I ask the rest of you your thoughts on what can folks do to uncover their blind spots.
I agree with everything that's been said. And I would also say it has to be intentional. and I think it was Lawrence who early on talked about curiosity. It has to be intentional curiosity. And the good news is, I don't think there's ever been a better time to access a multitude of resources that give us really deep and powerful insights into the lived experiences of people who are different from us. And the other thing I would throw in here too is similar to the point that Dionne made. I think there's also this sense that if you are a member of a marginalized group, somehow you know things and you have this experience. And in many ways, we do. Because living in the society that we live in, it is important for us to learn the majority approach, so to speak. So we are quite naturally multicultural just to survive. But by the same token, marginalized individuals too can have trust groups and references that are not diverse at all. And I often find that interesting. Because it's like many of us, if not all of us on some level, live in a bubble. And it's really about saying, I have got to be intentionally curious and close the gap. I don't think it's quite as difficult as it probably feels, because there is so much out there to learn, and so many resources in the public domain now than there've ever been.
Yeah, so adding here, I love that you teed it up, Patrice, because again, as a Black man in America, former Army officer, I'm a veteran, so I identify in all these spaces. But as an instructor and teaching at coaching programs, last summer, being introduced to pronouns. And I told y'all, I teed y'all up. I'm an old Pentecostal boy from the middle of Ohio, Bible Belt, all this other stuff. My sisters couldn't wear pants until they graduated, right? I got that as a background, right? I'm setting this up. And one of the participants said out loud, Lawrence, would it be okay if you addressed people by their preferred pronouns? And in my mind, I said, I'm Black, I'm a veteran, I'm a man in the South. You don't identify me as somebody who identifies with the struggle. Your struggle of pronouns ain't real. And I did all of that in a matter of seconds. And I still had to teach for another 2.5 hours, y'all. So this was in the first 5 minutes. And it was in that moment, the intentionality created around, where did that come from? Why was I having this reaction? And it came from a space, you talk about identifying blind spots. It's, what are those things that cause the hairs on your back of your neck to stand up? And it's because what happened, and for the entire 2.5 hours, I was writing myself notes. It was like, what is going on? And lucky and grateful enough, they ended up being one of my mentee coaches. And we were able to have this extremely meaningful discussion around how they saw themselves in community. And now I was able to now broaden my capacity to now talk about intersectionality, to now talk about gender identity, now to all these things I never intentionally exposed myself to. Even though I knew it was a thing, I had never leaned into it. And so now I had a reason. And so for us as coaches, those things that come up for you, and again, can you be conscious when things are happening within your body? Can you, when you feel it, when you think it, can you question it and challenge it where it is, so that you then can now be a student of self? There is no culmination as we grow. It's just making sure that you become a student of the things and how you move through this life and experience this life. That's why I hate YOLO. No, you die once, you live every day. And so if you live every day, you're going to experience things and become a student of these things. I believe that makes you a better coach.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love that so much. Everyone in the entire world has been given an invitation to reflect and challenge themselves about their own blind spots. And you can see this in your triggers. You can see this in the times that you felt uncomfortable when you see somebody living in a different life than you have, in various, social media posts. Every single time you feel that defensive urge or that like, oh my gosh, I can't deal with this. Like that is an invitation. And of course, we can't always be acting on and exploring every single moment that comes up. That would be exhausting, right? But it's a practice of just creating your own awareness of where in your life you notice these behaviors, these patterns, where you can potentially open up yourself to some more compassion, like Lawrence was saying, and really lean in and be like, what's going on? Bring in that curiosity. Why am I making this assumption? Why do I have this defensive reaction? Why am I scared here? Because there's so much learning to be had in those moments. And you don't even really need to, read revolutionary texts. Like you don't need to get out Fanon or Marx or Engels or anything like that to have that experience. You can just do that by just opening your eyes and like walking down the street.
I love that. And I just the thing that I have found is that folks are sometimes, they're scared to have the conversation. They're scared to lean into that curiosity for a number of reasons, right? It could be, I'm scared to say the wrong thing. Maybe it's, I'm scared what I'm going to uncover about myself or what you might uncover about me in this conversation. It could be a myriad of reasons, but people are scared or have some level of trepidation, at least, around, I want to ask this question, but I don't want to ask it because I don't know where the conversation is going to go, or it's going to be uncomfortable. And what I've told people is that, yes, there may be some uncomfortability in that dialogue, but 9 times out of 10, what I have found is that what's on the other side of that uncomfortability is so much goodness in the learning that comes that it's almost always worth it, right? So even if you have that fear of being curious, if you're scared to say the wrong thing, or you're scared what you might find out about yourself or what someone else might find out about you or what you might find out about that other person, trust me, it's always or almost always worth it, right? The uncomfortability is far less than the learning and enlightenment that can come from leaning in and being curious.
And I think too about building that relationship in the first place. So this is not out of the blue for many of us who got those emails last May and June from people, apologizing to me for colonialism and racial injustice and all of that. It's like, these are conversations we could have been having, and we want to build relationships where we can. And the last thing I wanted to add to around the blind spots are, and I say this because I'm hearing this a lot, if you're giving yourself a pass somehow, that's a blind spot. Oh, I'm from California, so really, we don't really, that's not as, I've traveled so much and I've been all over, or I'm dating someone from another culture, or another race, or another religion. And I hear that a lot. And I say that not in a joking tone. I say that because people are trying to, your point, Dionne, that fear, let me skirt around why I can't be biased and try to make people feel more comfortable. And the reality is every single human on this planet has a bias. If you say you don't see color, I can tell you right now, that ain't true. You don't see gender, that ain't true. You see everything. It is what you choose to do about it that makes the difference. And that's what we want to start to check ourselves for, talking about blind spots. Where am I trying to give myself a pass or write myself a pass? And as we all learned in elementary school, you cannot write a note for yourself and think that everyone else is going to adhere to it. So again, watch for those areas that you think you're trying to sort of give yourself a pass to kind of get through.
Right, and even if you don't see color, you see it. Now, how you interpret it may not necessarily be accurate, but you definitely see it.
You see it. I don't like to call anybody a liar, but you see it. You see something. We all see something. That's how our brains work. Or we hear it, whatever our faculties allow us to ingest, our brains are working to try to put it in boxes. That is natural. It is how we choose to engage with that.
Mm-hmm. And Alyssa, I see your hand. I just want to let everyone know we are like 6 minutes to, and I did earlier in the chat box invite everyone into this dialogue. I just want to also remind folks, if you have questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A box so that we can get to your question. And so Alyssa, I saw your hand up.
No, just really quick, adding on to what everyone else was saying in regards to how do we look at our biases. One thing is really pay attention to your language. I feel like that's something that people don't notice at all. And even not even something as being judgmental, but more like normal things, right? What does it mean to be professional? What does it mean to be unprofessional? A lot of these things are rooted in like problematic core, right? So really understanding a lot of the regular language that you use. Another one could be like smart, but I feel like because of the work that we do, the conversation around professionalism is the best one to really undo what are all these things. And what's amazing about this work is that you're doing this work for the purpose of just creating more inclusive spaces and serving your clients better. But at the same time, this is helping you out, right? Like, can you imagine how you're going to show up once you just dismantle all of these things because you're allowed to be more of yourself versus subscribing to whatever we were taught is okay or whatever we were taught is professional or presentable or anything of that nature. So that's all I wanted to say. I think Sarah, you were like on and off mute, so
Right.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I don't have the little hand raise icon. I must need to update my Zoom. Apologies. So I was like the manual version. I just want to offer, and I think this is a message to white women specifically, is that sometimes followership is leadership, and you don't have to be the leader of the issue that you're taking on. And I think, this came up on Omkari Williams' podcast, Stepping into Truth, which if anyone hasn't had a chance to listen to it, I recommend it. She looks at the intersection of coaching and social justice. But this idea that we don't need everyone to be the leader. And sometimes the best activism you can do is by finding leaders whose messages resonate with you and contributing to their efforts and putting capital behind it, putting your time, putting your energy, your thoughts, and really being there for in a display of solidarity and in action of solidarity. So just wanted to offer that. And then with one other coaching question, I think that can also really spark a lot of self-reflection on blind spots, and that is, what would you be capable of if you were to stand in your power? So I'd leave that there as a prompt.
Sarah, thank you for that. And I would ask if you could share in the chat box the author that you just referenced for those that may want to look up their work. And then there's a question in the Q&A, and Alyssa, you kind of touched on this a little bit, or at least where you were talking about a few minutes ago around language and stuff and professionalism and what have you. It kind of touches on this question. So I want to pose it to you, and then whoever else wants to chime in our last 2 minutes in this dialogue. So the question is, a big problematic theme is around spiritual bypassing. I hear a lot in what y'all are saying that speaks to me of the value in awareness and processing in level 1 and level 2, but I see level 6 and level 7 idolized. So how do you specifically see the levels play in engaging the ideas of social justice? That's a big question, so I don't know if we can get to all of it, but I do think that for sure, let's talk a little bit about in 60 seconds, right? Or 120 seconds, spiritual bypassing, and what we need to be mindful of as coaches and how it can show up in our coaching relationships and what we can do to mitigate that. 120 seconds.
Yeah, that's, Valerie, thank you for asking this, because this is the really big thing that I see. And this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier in terms of using the tools that we have and assuming that we can use this same tool in every single situation and with every single person. And And even in the discussion of the energy levels, it's a sort of same thing sometimes. Like there's a lot of shame around level 1 and level 2. And there's, like you said, like uplifting of level 6 and level 7. And we need to really acknowledge all the pieces that are going on in this space. And I feel like sometimes our job as coaches is to help our clients along a process. And sometimes if a client comes to us on level 1 and level 2, it's easy for us to be like, all right, let's shift them that one energy level up, right? And when we do that, we don't have that exploratory moment with them of understanding why they are there. Why is this specific situation that they are in bringing them to that place versus trying to have them see the other side, when maybe that level 1 and level 2 is necessary and it's appropriate in that moment. That's where I'm going to pause because I want everyone else to get a chance to at the time.
I will just jump in really quickly because my little trainer hat's coming in, and recognize level 6 and level 7 does not mean I don't experience anything else. I am not an energy level. I still experience all levels of energy, but when I am able to operate from my level 6 and 7 experience, I am able to tap into catabolic levels of energy from a place of choice and a place of perspective that I use that as a tool, just as you all have shared, to address those issues in a way that I feel that is going to be most productive. But it is a choice. It doesn't mean that I magically hit something and now I am this. No, we still experience all levels of energy. We want to recognize that when we are accessing it from that place of level 6 and 7, it's a choice as to how I'm choosing to show up in those moments, as opposed to that being chosen for me. That's it. I know it's time.
So Tanya, thank you for that. Alyssa, thank you for that. All of you, I want to thank this entire panel for your time, for your thoughts and your perspectives. I want to thank all of our participants. We are at 1 minute after. I know as coaches, many of you may have things going on. I need to be starting right now. So I want to thank you all for your time. I want to remind you that this is Coaching Week and that there are more events taking place through iPEC as well as through ICF, some really great webinars around other topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So check that all out. And thank you for your time. Have an amazing rest of the day. And thank you.